Good afternoon and welcome to our third Facebook Live podcast. I'm here again with Jennifer Blum, domestic violence survivor, advocate, and founder of the Help Save Foundation. My name is Sherry Patapas and I'm an LICSW. I've worked with victims in the court system as well as providing counseling within my private practice. We would like to begin today by thanking each and every one of you who have watched and shared our two previous podcasts. Each time you hit share, you're not only helping get much needed, important information out there, but you're also helping to end the stigma of living in an abusive situation and letting anyone in these situations know that they are not alone. Jen?
I'm going to begin this week, as we do every week, with the very important phone numbers that we'd like you to pay attention to and have programmed somewhere. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-799-7233. And if you are unable to speak with someone on the phone, you can also text HOME to 741-741. Of course, if you're in an emergency, you can dial 911. And if you just like to speak with Sherry or I, you can reach out to us at the Help Save Foundation, which is the Help Save Foundation at Yahoo is our email. You can contact us right through the website, which is the helpsavefoundation.org. And you can also get to us right through our Facebook page, the Help Save Foundation. Last week, we focused on giving you some new resources for helping people or getting yourself some help as a victim of domestic violence, and also ways that individuals could be involved in their communities. And again, we appreciate all the shares. That's part of being involved in your community, and we've gotten a lot of really great responses from it. The questions are coming in, the comments are coming in, and today we're really focused on, originally we were going to focus on a different subject, but because of how much came in regards to our youth and different parents asking different questions about what they could do to start monitoring their youth in the sense of the digital age. So we're really homing in on that today. We're going to give you a full list of different things that you can do to help your children through that, or just be paying attention a little bit more. It's nice because with our kids home right now, we're able to pay a little bit more attention. We have more of their attention. So it's a great time to really sit down and talk to your children about how they feel about different things, and if they have any questions or concerns for themselves or friends of theirs that they may have that are in a domestic violence situation. And domestic violence really needs to be honed in at a very young age. I personally do a lot of work in our communities, directly in our communities, working with the youth ages 13 to into college. And I'll tell you that some of the things that I've heard and seen at the young ages of 13, 14, and 15 are pretty alarming. And for myself, a big eye-opener for me was my direct contact with groups of boys, 20, 25 kids to a group and younger. And the things that they would say and the things that they would come out with as a group of boys really opened my eyes to the fact that boys are just as much affected by domestic violence as girls are. And in a lot of situations and in our times, we're not really thinking, a lot of people don't think that boys are affected because boys are supposed to be strong and macho. And unfortunately, that's why they tend to not come forward. But the reality of it is that boys are very much victims of domestic violence just as much as girls are. They just don't talk about it as much.
Right. If I may, just really quickly before we
Absolutely.
even get into all of this, and we're not going to necessarily focus on just this piece, but, as Jen's talking, it's just reminding me of situations that I've observed and also conversations that I as well have had with kids in counseling, and also working in residential group homes that, part of this is, as Jen said, everybody's home now. And so you can kind of be a little bit more aware of what they're doing and saying. And so again, there are often times when you can hear, conversations between, your child and their significant other. Again, and that's male or female. And if you're hearing, conversations that, might be laughed off, or again, it's, well, I need, or I want this. And if you don't do this for me, then that's a problem. And you're hearing these conversations, know that, again, this can happen on both sides, and females, can be just as bullying and demanding, and, that's also abuse. So just something to keep in mind if you start to hear certain conversations that, sometimes we joke about it or laugh it off, but it's actually, can be the beginning of a very serious abusive relationship. Just something to be aware of.
Yeah, and a lot of times it is. And today, we're stuck in this digital world where we have things like Snapchat and TikTok and House Party and Facebook and Instagram. I mean, it's just endless. There are so many different ways digitally to
Yep.
be in touch with people, and see different things that people are posting and monitoring. And it's pretty incredible the things that kids are going through today. And we didn't have all of these we didn't have any of this digital stuff when we were
Right.
younger. So now just being able to kind of police it, if you will, as a parent and see what's going on in your child's life. I mean, I think it's extremely important. Now, being that both Sherry and I work with a lot of young adults, we do teach them about healthy relationships and dating violence. I do a lot of work in the schools. I do a lot of work outside of the schools in small groups or extracurricular activities where, whether it's karate or Girl Scouts or whatever it is, boys and girls. And I typically try to keep small groups because I'm not a lecturer. I like people to be interacting with everything that I'm doing. So when I'm working with our youth, if they're sitting down in a desk, I'm sitting down in a desk exactly like them across from them. And everything that we talk about is, I expect an interaction. I'm not there to just talk. And in that, I have found so many things. And, it's how you approach them. And if you allow yourself to be open and you talk to them in a way that they want to be spoken to, which is on the same wavelength, not talk to them, but talk with them, or talk at them,
Yep.
talk with them. I've seen a lot of different things. I had a group over the summer at a basketball camp, all boys. They ranged from 6th grade to 8th grade. And I was pretty shocked to hear how many of them had been hit by a girl, had been spit at by a girl, had been pushed around by a girl. And their biggest concern was, what do I do? I can't defend myself. I can't do anything to protect myself because the second I do, I've now just become just as bad as them. And now I'm putting myself at risk of getting in trouble. And I think that that's really important for boys to understand that, we all need to be respected, men and women. Like it's not just us women need to be respected, but men as well. I mean, another situation I saw over the summer, again, within our community, it wasn't at a basketball camp, but it was a basketball court. And my children were out and they were playing basketball and we were with a whole group of people. I'm sitting there on the bleachers like my police mom that I am. And I watched this boy take his shirt off because he's playing basketball in like 98-degree weather. And this girl came charging from behind me off the bleachers right onto the court, asking him what the hell he thought he was doing, taking his shirt off. Now, me obviously being there, I immediately interject and I ask, like, what is the problem here? Like, why are you charging at this boy, asking him why he took his shirt off? And she just merely looked at me and said, well, if I'm not allowed to wear shorts because boys are going to look at me, then he shouldn't be able to take his shirt off on the basketball court where there's girls that are going to look at him. That is the beginning of an unhealthy relationship.
Mhm. Right.
And
Right. And
very
that goes
important.
both ways, right? For her even saying, if I'm not allowed to wear, I such and such because people are going to look at me. So again, telling a female male what they can and can't wear because you don't want other people to look at them. Again, sometimes we shrug that off. Oh, it's just some innocent jealousy, and that shows somebody that you care about them. But that's not what that means. All that means is that you want to control what they're wearing. And obviously, we'll get into more about that. But that's what Jen just said is such a prime example. Of again that beginning of telling somebody what to do and what to wear and how to be, and that is not a healthy relationship. That's not just that little jealousy and all that's great in a relationship. That's not what we're talking about. And I just think again, when you see and hear things like that, just being cognizant of it and acknowledging it with your kid is very important.
Yes, very important. Yeah. And the other thing I think that a lot of people, come from good homes and have two-parent houses and have never experienced any domestic violence. And so you think that, oh, well, that would never happen to that person. I'm a prime example of that. I come from a two-parent home. My parents have been married, I don't know, 44, 45 years, always showed lots of love. I mean, we don't leave the house without hugging, kissing, telling each other we love each other. Um, I didn't grow up with any violence. I didn't even grow up with parents that argued. I mean, they were a pretty what I would consider normal family and everyday life. You know, both of them worked full time. We did what we were supposed to help out, but I didn't have two parents that were volatile in any way. I came from a very good home, and yet I was a classic case of domestic violence in my early 20s. So I think it's important, even if you don't think that this is your home or you have to worry about that because you've taught your children the right way and you feel as though this could never happen to your child because you don't live in a house like that. Very, very wrong. I mean, I'm assuming my parents never in a million years would have thought that I would have been 13 years in a domestic violence relationship, coming from a very open, welcoming, loving home. But sure enough, I was. So for any of you out there that think like this can't happen to my kid, or this isn't happening, or they have it under control, no, absolutely not. And it's a good idea to step in when you can.
Absolutely.
So Sherry's going to give us a couple of things to look over as parents in the digital world, especially because, you know, as she said earlier, we hear conversations. I've heard some pretty crappy conversations just being in different community events and just being out. And it scares me and makes me nervous for the youth of today. And this is our youth, and you know, men and women deserve to be respected equally, and that's what this is about. Like, we want everyone to understand that your boys are being as affected as your girls are being affected, and we can help them all. So let's band together and do such a thing. So Sherry, go ahead and give us some of those great ideas that you have going on.
You got it. So, you know, Jen pointed out that she has been working with youth starting, you know, 6th grade. So, you know, we're talking about 11, 12, 13 years old. And I, you know, as I'm reading this, and when I say your child, I'm really referring to those age groups. I work with kids at this point as young as 10, so 10, 11 years old. And I'm just letting you know that it is very rare for me to meet with a child at that age at this point that doesn't have access to some kind of social media. They all have phones. Every single one of the youth that I work with, again, as young as the age of 10, has access to a telephone at this point. And so I just think, again, as I'm saying child, you know, yes, I'm, or your, you know, your children or kids, we're referring to, you know, as young as, you know, those ages 10, 11, 12, all the way up to, you know, high school and college years. Okay. So we're going to begin with digital abuse. The use of technologies to bully, harass, stalk, or intimidate a partner. For example, constant texting, being pushy when they don't get a response. So they're constantly texting your child and you know, they're not getting a response back, so they keep going and they keep pushing. They start making more phone calls. You know, and to them, they're not getting an answer quick enough. And you could be doing anything. You could be taking a nap. You could be with your family, but that's not okay. So you know, requiring them to respond immediately, you know, that's considered abuse. You know, you can't tell, this is controlling and it's intrusive. And, you know, having an expectation that you're supposed to be answered right away, that's again, that's a very controlling and abusive way to treat your partner. Your child, if you notice that your child appearing to be increasingly nervous because they're constantly being accused of cheating or not being where they say they're supposed to be or where they are, even though they are where they say they're supposed to be. You know, your child feeling defensive, you know, all the time and having to always answer for their whereabouts. So constantly feeling on edge, paranoid that no matter what they do or say, that because their partner is, you know, controlling of their every move and everything that they're doing, that they're being accused of doing things that they're not really doing. So that feeling, and if you notice that feeling, you know, I will be honest, like, yes, we certainly have children that have anxiety and things like that, but an increase in paranoia and nervousness and defensiveness, I will be honest with you, clinically speaking, that is not a normal way, you know, for a child to be acting. Did you want to add something, Jen?
I just wanted to add something about as far as like the apps and stuff, because I've seen a lot of this. And when you talked about the nervousness, it immediately triggered something in me as far as what I've seen with kids. These apps like Snapchat and Life 360, I mean, everybody knows where you are. It's not even a matter of having location services on anymore where like an iMessage goes through and people can see. I've seen people get very upset with others because they checked their Snapchat and they're over here and they're not supposed to be there. This is important. I mean, your child should not be monitored by anybody but you, really. I mean, the boyfriend, the girlfriend should not know that they stopped at Cumberland Farms. Not that Cumberland Farms is even around anymore, but that they stopped at Cumberland Farms before they got to their house, or that they stopped at a friend's house and they were sitting there. I mean, these social media outlets actually allow you to literally zoom in and see exactly the
Right.
house that these people, these kids, their boyfriends, girlfriends are at. That is not okay. Like, no one should have their privacy taken from them in that way.
Mhm.
And I don't think that the youth realize how important it is to have that privacy and to not constantly be able to be monitored,
Mhm.
because that's exactly what's happening. Like, you're able to see literally exactly where people are,
Yep.
and I don't think that's healthy at all.
Right. And I don't think we realize the seriousness in the sense that, again, if an adult was doing that, we would say, well, that's stalking. That's serious. That is a crime. Well, it's not any different. It's not any less than just because, again, you have a teenager doing it and checking up on somebody. That is considered stalking as well. It's not a joke. It's not, oh, haha, they love me so much. They want to know where I am at all times. No, again, it's controlling. And again, and looked at as a stalking behavior. And, it's important to be aware when your kids, and I don't care what age they are, honestly, like we're talking, if they're in your home, then again, people know where they are, they know where you live, they know it. So it's important to make sure that you know what's going on with their phone. I mean, I'm no offense to everybody, but the truth is most of these phones are not paid for by your children. So realistically, you should have control over what they're looking at and what apps they have access to. And again, making sure that parental controls are there, because there's a reason that they exist. And again, being aware that it shouldn't come to a point where a child, again, you see your kid acting differently and having all of these different behaviors and feelings, and all of a sudden they don't want to, they're again nervous all the time and anxious. You don't want it to be what that moment of, I had no idea what was going on. This has been going on for months, and now, you know what I mean? There are ways to be able to monitor that. And it's not a judgment against anybody and saying parents need to do, that you're all doing terrible jobs. And that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that, not everybody is always aware that these apps, as Jen was saying, that people have access to where your child is. And not everybody is aware that, again, you can turn these things off. And, and the apps that you can't, there's a possibility that you might want to just say, I'm sorry, that's just not an app that I feel comfortable with you having. Um, so, and just to go back to, the list of where I was at, I'm going to switch it up a little bit and just talking about just day-to-day behaviors. So, your child's partner telling them, that they can't hang out with certain friends, that they have to block them. So actually, speaking again of social media, they need to block them off of all social media. They don't want them to even spend time with their family. Like, even that, sometimes for our partners, that's too much. Like, why do you have to hang out with them? Why can't you hang out with me? Again, initially I get that it gets translated into, oh, they care about me and they love me and they want to spend all this time with me. And that's why these big conversations are important for adults and parents to have with your child, to understand that, again, there's a difference between caring, and there's a difference between, wanting to spend time with somebody and literally wanting to control what your child is doing at all times. And so, and they're not necessarily at an age to understand that and to be able to decipher between those two things. And so that's why it's our job. Jen obviously goes into the schools and has these conversations. And as she pointed out, there's a lot of kids that her conversations are oftentimes the first time that an adult has sat with them and had an honest conversation about what's going on. And I just think that that's also something to be aware of.
And that's 100% true. And a lot of times, it's not only the first conversation for them. They're experiencing stuff at home, or they've seen stuff at home, and I'm the first person they can even talk to about it, because now we're in a comfortable situation, in a comfortable setting where they feel like they can talk to me because it's happened to me, and so they can get some answers at the same time. um, the younger the kids are, the more we have to talk to them, because the longer we let it go, and say, we have 15 and 16-year-olds, they've already experienced some of this stuff, so now it's become the norm for them. We're trying to stop this before it becomes the
Yes.
norm. And that's why, 12 and 13, starting in 6th grade. I mean, I don't really like to do elementary school because it's not always the greatest conversation to have with an elementary school child. I mean,
Mhm.
everyone's growing into themselves. Middle school is very, very, very important as far as who people are becoming. Those young children are becoming young men and women. And we want to get to them in the beginning. We don't want to get to them when they're 16 years old, driving around and, boyfriends are stalking them and looking for them and hiding in bushes and knowing where they are at all times. We want to stop this stuff at a young age. We want these kids to understand at 12, 13, 14 that this is unhealthy behavior. It's not healthy behavior.
Right. Right, absolutely. And taking from what Jen just said, speaking of unhealthy behavior and things that kids get used to. So, another way to quote unquote show trust, having access to personal passwords is another controlling behavior, that again is often confused with trust. Well, if you trust me, then you'll give me this information. And if I can trust you, then I should be able to see everything that you're doing because you're not cheating on me and you're not hiding anything from me. That's not what this is about. There is, there's no reason to be proving trust to somebody. All that is being demanding of them. And again, wanting access to things that they shouldn't have access to. So again, if you do notice things like that, like, oh, if your child just happens to, nonchalantly mention that, so-and-so has my information. Oh, if she wants to access this or she wants to do this, that's not okay. And I feel like most parents kind of, have that idea, like, people shouldn't be having those passwords and usernames, but that doesn't always happen. And so just in case, again, having that conversation, and if you hear it, addressing it, that's not something that's okay. And there's no reason for anyone to have access to people's, anyone's, social media. Being pushed or feeling forced into sending or receiving explicit photos, or even if you consented, but your partner threatens to use these photos against you by sharing them. This is also a form of abuse. Again, we don't always realize that these are conversations that are happening, at very young ages. And it is frightening, when I have counseling sessions and I'm having a conversation again with an 11, 12-year-old who's telling me that she's afraid that all of her photos that she has sent they're going to be shared with somebody. I'm grateful that hasn't happened very recently, but this is not something that's new. And I think that we can't just ignore, we're giving them access to so many things and so much information that, to be honest with you, they're really not necessarily prepared to process yet. And, they don't always think, as we all know, of the consequences of their actions. And so again, even if a child says, well, I said it was okay, one, we know that that's not okay, it's not legal, but also that you don't realize that what happens if something happens and your partner now is trying to force you into doing something that you don't want to do, and now threatens you with, I'm going to share these pictures that you sent to me if you don't do whatever it may be, whether it be, I want you to do drugs with me, alcohol with me, sex with me, whatever it is. So again, kids don't always think, adults don't always think of consequences. So how can we expect them to do the same thing?
So I just want to interject there for one sec, because I had a case last summer, girl's 19 years old. And her family had come to me. This goes back to a whole Snapchat situation. And again, why we should talk to our children at a younger age. So we're talking about a 19-year-old out of high school into college. And she was doing whatever she wanted on Snapchat. She was sending pictures to various different people. Back to the passwords, at some point, she had given her password to one of these guys. And one of these guys went into Snapchat and put her pictures everywhere. Now, this became a crisis, an actual crisis situation, where her family had to get her to the crisis center because she wanted to harm herself, knowing that all of these people had just seen very explicit photos of her. Now, A, should she have been taking those photos? No, but she did. B, this whole Snapchat thing and a lot of these different social media outlets that claim that, once you open it, it's gone. Nothing vanishes. There's nothing in the digital world that vanishes. This was a perfect example of that. Those pictures didn't vanish. They were put into some folder somewhere in cyberspace, and they were easily obtainable once this person needed to obtain them. And once he was frustrated enough with her, or possibly found out that other people had gotten the pictures as well, and he wasn't the only one, he exploited her everywhere. And it became more of just a domestic situation. This girl was in dire need. She didn't know what to do. And now she couldn't show her face within her normal social groups because people were looking at her differently. And the fact that she even considered hurting herself That's pretty profound. And that's why we're addressing these things, because it's not, there are so many different aspects to it. That's just one aspect that could have really gone in a very bad direction. But I mean, we need to talk to our kids about this.
Yes.
These outlets, they're not helping. They're hurting the situation. And young boys and young girls are sending pictures to one another that are going to be used against them later on in life. I mean, very sadly.
It is. Absolutely. And that's why we're trying to do this, so that this is proactive and you can be proactive. And so you don't wake up one day and, your child is in crisis. Your child has already harmed themselves. And, it's a question of what just happened. And, and because obviously something like that, a kid isn't going to want to tell you, yes, I took these pictures of myself and this is what I did with them. That's a frightening thing to have to admit to your family. And now all of a sudden those pictures are going everywhere. And a child sometimes, again, thinking of consequences, they don't know what to do. So what's the fastest way to get myself out of this? And unfortunately, sometimes the fastest way in their head is to hurt themselves in some way. And obviously that is the last thing that any of us want to happen. And so, I think that it is just really important to keep in mind, again, that this isn't just, talking about, social media and these are, Jen just said, these are serious consequences, and kids, even age of 19, hopefully would have a better, you would hope would have some better coping skills and mechanisms to try to figure out how to manage that. But she didn't, and so again, and who's to say if someone talked to her about these things when she was younger, what that would, what the outcome of this would have been. And it could have been, again, that she wouldn't have done that at all, like as in the pictures and posting them. Okay. Being forced or coerced to use drugs or alcohol oftentimes is also a means to coerce, a child or a partner into sex, and being pushed or feeling forced into sexual activities that anybody is not ready for, or being made to feel guilty also if they say no. So these are ways that, again, partners are using, power and control and things like guilt, and paranoia and trust issues to be controlling in a relationship. If you're not ready for something, then you have every right to say no. And nobody has a right to make you feel bad about that or guilty about that. And the reason why I kind of talk about the drugs and alcohol as the connection is because, and this is not to put blame on anybody. If you do drink, and if your kid, does something, experiments with drugs and something happens, it's not to blame them at all. What I'm just saying is that we have to keep in mind when we're talking to our kids that if someone is trying to really convince you to use drugs, to use alcohol, remember that that means that your inhibitions are now significantly lowered. And we don't want, again, any other situations to happen, okay? And no more violent, any more violent situations, or again, unwanted sexual, excuse me, unwanted, I'm missing my word here, sexual contact, excuse me. We don't want that to happen. And so again, just having those conversations with them, and like Jen said earlier, and having them with them, not at them, just sitting down with them and understanding, like asking them, what do you know about these things, and just talking to them about it and learning what they know, and letting them know that this is a safe place for us to have this conversation. This is no judgment. And I just want to talk to you about this, is helpful. And hopefully this information that we're passing on, it also arms you, right? So when you do have a conversation with your child and looking at you like, what you have no idea what we go through, you can actually say, I actually do. I have an idea.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And when I open up with all my young adults, when I say interactive, I truly mean interactive. Like my first question after I've said who I am is, what is a healthy relationship to you? What is dating violence to you? And they're able to tell me what they think of those things. Mm-hmm. And some kids know and some kids don't. And some kids have experienced it and other kids haven't. But my first question to them is, what is a healthy relationship to you? What do you think a healthy relationship is? Mm-hmm. So I'm not going at them. I'm asking them a question about how they feel or what they know or what they think a healthy relationship is. And based on their answer, you just can go from there. I mean, that gets the whole ball rolling, because they know that you're not there to talk down to them. You're not there to be the know-it-all parent. You're asking them a question like, what is it that you think a healthy relationship is? And they just open up and start talking, whether it's your child or somebody else's child. If you're asking them and you want their opinion, they want their opinion to matter. They want to be heard. They just don't know how to broach that subject either. So if you're able to do it in a manner that you're asking a question versus prodding at them, you're
Yes.
actually, you're in a good position.
Mhm. And you're actually, by asking the question, you're making the assumption and letting them know that you respect them enough that you know that they know something, that they have
Yep.
an idea and an opinion on it. So again, it's asking the question to open up the doors. Yeah, thank you, Jen. The last thing that that I did want to mention regarding red flags, okay, and I think some of this is something that we all kind of know, but this is literally just a reminder. So I'm just going to quickly go through this list. If you notice, your child's constantly being put down or saying something about being put down, or you suddenly notice a major change in self-confidence and self-esteem, again, that might be a red flag. Their partner has an explosive temper, excuse me. Isolating them, again, from friends and family, checking their cell phone, checking their email without permission, extreme jealousy or insecurity. Again, possessiveness. This is not a sign of love. This is a sign of control. And that's very important for our youth, I truly believe, to understand more than anything is trying to decipher between these two things.
Mm-hmm.
That people can care about you and love you and they want you to be happy and they don't need you to check in with them, as Jen mentioned before, at all times. That's not necessary. That is a controlling behavior and not one to be kind of shrugged off or, oh, look at that, it's cute. It's not. It's definitely not cute. And I do believe that our youth really struggles with this because they're getting attention and initially it's positive attention and initially it's, you're beautiful or, you know what I mean? You're great in that, speaking of basketball, you're great. Oh, I love watching you play basketball. And it's all this uplifting stuff until all of a sudden it's not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just important, again, to really try to go over that with them. And then obviously, if your child is ever physically hurt by their partner, I mean, right there, I mean, I know, again, that goes without saying, people will be like, well, no kidding, but keep in mind that, again, we can say, oh, we were roughhousing or this happened. If you, as we've said before about our gut feeling, you're starting to feel like there's something that's not quite right with this relationship, and you've already had concerns maybe about the possessiveness and again, your child's like, oh, I'm constantly on their phone with this one person and can't put their phone down for 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden there's an injury and then you notice some bruising or something and you're like, where did this come from? And maybe it doesn't fit for you. Again, have a conversation. Just ask them. Just let them know. And again, always letting them know, no matter what they say in that moment, you're not judging them. You just want to help them and you're just a support to them. But again, I think as parents, sometimes we shrug off our gut feeling, and the truth is that, because kids will do that all the time, right? They're like, oh, mom, dad, it's no big deal. Nothing happened, da, da, da. And then they rush by you to their room. Well, they want to know, even that rush by, I would bet my life that what they want is for you to follow them into that room and have that conversation and let them know that they're not alone and they can talk to you. And please know that neither one of us thinks that these are easy conversations. Obviously this is what I do for a living, and this is what Jen, has also taken on within her life's work to work with kids and youth. So, this is something that we practice. This is something that we do. And so it's not like, no one is sitting here saying this is so easy and you should just be able to do it. Again, that's why we're doing these podcasts. And that's why, when Jen talks about the fact that you can get in touch with us through the Help Save Foundation, if you have questions or if you're thinking like, I want to have a conversation, again, you have Jen going into school systems. She's working with, groups of youth, so her experience in that area is, immense. And I would tap into that, and ask, I want to start a conversation. I just need a little bit of help. Like, how do I start this? And what question do I ask? Please feel free to reach out. Did you want to add anything to that part of it, Jen, before
No,
I
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Feel like you can reach out to us. We will help you with those conversation starters. It is very important. It's just as important as having the sex conversation with your child. I mean, none of us want to be grandparents before we should. At least I don't. So, that's a conversation that I've had with my children. And this is a conversation that goes right behind it, right with it.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not a conversation that domestic violence is huge. I mean, there are more people coming forward now than ever, and there's still tons of people that stay silent. I mean, just in the last few weeks, we've had, unfortunately, a lot of fatalities because of this quarantine and people being together, of, husbands and wives fatally taking each other's lives because of this. This isn't, again, like I've said before, this isn't going anywhere. So being proactive and starting to talk to your children at a young age, I mean, all you're going to do is give them a couple more steps forward in the right direction. And hopefully they'll be able to see different signs and realize if they're in an unhealthy relationship before it's escalated too far. Because as Sherry said earlier, and as an adult, the same thing happened to me. Everything starts off great, and there's a lot of positive, and there's a lot of reassurance, and then as time goes, and you're missing your friends and you're missing your family, but you're thinking, oh, this person, they just want to spend a lot of time with me, they just want to be with me because I'm a fun person to be with. And in actuality, they're all steps to take you away from the people who are going to see the damage they're going to do later on. That starts at a young age. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it over and over again. I've talked to so much youth that has experienced domestic violence at a very young age and didn't even realize that what they were going through was domestic violence until we had this discussion. And then they realized, okay, so this is not what it's supposed to be like. This is not what a healthy relationship is supposed to be like. But if you don't have that conversation with your children, and nobody has that conversation with their children, then that's going to take longer and longer for them to realize the situation they are in. And quite possibly it's going to turn very bad for them because they weren't able to get out when they could have gotten out, which was in the beginning stages. I mean, as we all know, and domestic violence progresses and unhealthy relationships progress, people become more and more possessive. So that's when things really start to get scary because of the things that can happen because of how possessive someone is getting. So we want our youth to see this in the beginning stages so they can say, hey, no, this isn't where I should be right now. I should be more respected than that. And that's what we want. We don't want our kids to be 17, 18, 19 years old, 2 years into a relationship and realizing, oh my God, how am I going to get out now? Like, what am I going to be able to do to get out? We're trying to help right from the start. So have the conversation and reach out to us. We're here. We want to talk to you guys. So reach out to us, ask us questions, whatever material you need, we can provide you with. We have it.
Right. And, one of the key things I know we brought up earlier, and, and Jen just said it again about isolating. If you notice that what your child had, maybe 5 or 6 really close friends, and they were always doing things together and everything was great. And all of a sudden, slowly but surely, you notice that your child's not having these, like, they're not spending time with anybody. They, it's like one after another. And then they're just, oh, we got in a fight. Oh, this happened. Well, one argument here and there, absolutely. I think that happens all the time in friend groups. But if you start to notice that your child is not spending time with her friends or his friends anymore, and the only person that they're spending time with is their partner, that is one of the biggest red flags, because again, as adults and as children, having them isolated from everybody, now they have no support system. And again, usually by the time everything kind of blows up, they are afraid to come to you. They don't know what to say, and they also don't even know what's going on. And it's not because, again, as parents, you're making them feel like they can't come to you. It's just that this is, if it hasn't been discussed, and then the first time you're ever going to have this conversation is when when all of a sudden, like, everything is already, you haven't spoken to your friends, you're isolated from everybody, and this person has been putting hands on your child, for quite a long time, and that's the first time they talk to you about it. They are deathly afraid. We've talked about adults and how long it takes people to be able to come forward. As a child, I mean, that's a scary thing to have to finally come to an adult and say, this is what's happening, and I don't even know what's happening, but I know it's not okay. So again, that's just a huge red flag that your child is not spending time with their friends, and only with this one person. And Jen is going to actually wrap up today on a different topic, and sort of just that she's going to piggyback on what I'm finishing with. So I'm just going to wrap up my piece, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jen to kind of finish up. Does that work?
Perfect.
All right. So adults, as well as children and teens, have relationship rights. So this is, again, something that you can utilize as a tool, if you want to start that conversation and letting your children know that they have rights in their relationships. They have rights to privacy, both online and off, to feeling safe and respected. They have the right to deciding who they want to date and who they want to be friends with and who they want to spend time with. They have the right to say no to anything that does not feel good or right to them, whether it's sex, alcohol, drugs, or the relationship. And they and everybody has the right to live free from violence and abuse. The National Dating Abuse Hotline, which we brought up last week, is a major resource, and it focuses on helping young people who have concerns about dating relationships. They help with online resources for youth and or adults to ask some basic questions about your relationship, helping you determine if you or your child is in a potentially abusive relationship or situation. They're available via telephone. You can call them at 866-331-9474, or you can text Loveis, which is one word, to 22522. There's also a live chat option and an escape button that will immediately get you off of their site and hide your search history. And again, the hotline and website is open to those calling on behalf of themselves or on behalf of someone else. Their website is loveisrespect.org. And I'll be honest with you, I have utilized that site quite often for myself and for clients as well. And they are wonderful. They have advocates they can connect you with who are available 24/7. They're specially trained on issues relating to dating abuse and healthy relationships, as well as crisis intervention. They can help find local resources such as counseling or a support group or even legal services if needed. Jen?
So I want to wrap up today, kind of a little bit of a different subject, but something that has come to the forefront in the last few weeks, and even more so right now. So I know there's a lot of controversy about masks, and we're all going back into the community, and things are opening up. A lot of people are going back to work now, and they're required to wear a mask for 8-10 hours a day. Even going into stores wearing a mask. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it because a couple of weeks ago, I actually reached out to Sherry because I had a woman that reached out to me. She was not only a domestic violence survivor, but she is also a rape survivor. And she continued to work throughout this entire pandemic. And when it was mandatory for people to start wearing masks, she took about 2 or 3 days. And she reached out and she said, I am freaking out. She said, I have to. I work 40 hours a week. I have to wear a mask for 8 hours a day. And it immediately brings me back to being raped and beaten. And it really hit for me because I myself have been suffocated and strangled. And I can't imagine having to wear a mask for 8 hours a day. I can't imagine what it's like to put that mask on for a short time other than the supermarket. I've been one of those people that has truly stayed home. I haven't left much, and the more I thought about it and the more I realized what people are going through putting that mask on, I ask that everyone try to be a little kind because you have no idea what that person has been through. And unless you have experienced things like suffocation and strangulation or just having your mouth shut so you're not screaming anymore so anyone can hear you, you're not going to understand what it's like to have a mask put over your face and not be able to breathe appropriately, and the different feelings that are going through those people that are experiencing that at that time. Mm-hmm. So I know there's a lot of controversy. I know that people are back and forth about it. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't wear it. What I'm saying is if you see somebody that rips their mask off in the middle of the store, don't freak out at them, start yelling at them that they should have a mask on, because for them, they could be being taken away in an ambulance because they're having an anxiety attack because they just thought of that last time that they were being strangled or something was being stuffed in their mouth to shut them up. So we're just asking today, like, as we're going back into the community, as we're trying to navigate through our new norm, that take into consideration that a lot of people have had some really traumatic things happen in their lives, that putting that mask on is just not as easy as putting that mask on. So we're going to wrap up today by really saying, like, be kind and be kind to everybody else. And again, we are so grateful for everyone that watches us, everyone that shares us. The feedback is amazing, more than I ever expected. We look forward to seeing what we're going to talk about next week because we know when we start feeding through what you guys have written and what you really want to talk about. Super excited that today we talked about our youth because, again, Sherry and I both work with our youth. It's very important. We see sometimes what you're not seeing. They tell us things that they're not necessarily telling you because that conversation hasn't been opened yet. So let's work together and open those conversations and get our kids talking about what they need to talk about and being just very supportive. And, you know, when we're talking about the passwords, only you as a parent should have a password to your kid's phone. I know I have mine and they don't get away with much. So thank you everybody for watching. We appreciate you and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.